They say some objects carry the weight of their history. Forgotten by time, left to gather dust, they sit silently, watching, waiting. But some objects should never be found, never touched. And among them was a doll, a porcelain doll with eyes so lifeless, yet so aware. What began as a simple relic in an old shop would become the source of unspeakable terror. This is the story of the doll no one could escape. In a quiet, unassuming town, nestled between thick, shadowy woods, there lived an elderly woman named Clara. Clara ran a tiny antique shop filled with relics of the past, aged clocks, dusty books, and forgotten toys. One particular item sat prominently in the corner, a porcelain doll with glassy, lifeless eyes. Its hair, once golden, had faded to an ashen yellow. The doll seemed wrong. Customers avoided it, often remarking that it felt as though the doll was watching them. But Clara never sold the doll. She kept it for a reason, a secret she had never shared. She claimed the doll was her late daughter's favorite toy. But late-night visitors to the shop often reported hearing whispers. Some even swore they saw the doll move, its head subtly turning toward the door as they entered. Clara denied these claims, but her pale face and trembling hands told another story. One fateful day, a young couple entered the shop. They were drawn to the doll, its eerie charm oddly mesmerizing. Despite Clara's protests, they purchased it. That night, the doll sat on a shelf in their living room, its lifeless eyes reflecting the flickering light of the television. But something about the room felt different, colder. The couple soon noticed strange occurrences. At night, they would hear faint footsteps echoing through the halls, though no one was there. Objects moved on their own. A vase toppled, books fell from shelves, and lights flickered inexplicably. Worst of all, the doll seemed to change positions. Sometimes it would be turned toward the hallway, as if waiting for someone to pass. One stormy night, the wife awoke to the sound of soft laughter. Thinking it was the television, she went downstairs, only to find the doll sitting on the coffee table, staring directly at her. The air grew icy, and as she stepped closer, she swore the doll's lips moved. A whisper, faint but clear. "You can't leave." Terrified, the couple decided to get rid of the doll. They threw it into a bonfire in their backyard, watching as the flames consumed it. But just as they began to relax, a chilling realization dawned on them. The faint laughter hadn't stopped. Turning back toward the house, they froze. The doll was sitting on the windowsill, unharmed. No one knows what happened to the couple after that night. The house stands abandoned, windows boarded up. But locals still report strange occurrences. Some claim to hear laughter when passing by. Others say they've seen the doll sitting in the window, waiting patiently for its next owner. They say some objects are cursed, carrying with them the pain and malice of past owners. The doll remains a mystery, a reminder that some things are better left untouched, and some secrets are meant to stay buried. Over time, the doll became the stuff of local legends. Teens dared each other to approach the house, leaving trinkets or food on the porch as offerings. Some swore they saw the doll's eyes blink, while others claimed their offerings disappeared by morning. One boy who touched the doorknob was later found wandering the woods, muttering incoherently about a voice in the dark. Years later, a traveling antiques dealer came across the house, unaware of its reputation. Drawn to the doll's craftsmanship, he took it with him. Almost immediately, strange events began to plague his travels. His car would break down on empty roads. He would wake up to find the doll sitting on his bedside table, though he left it locked in a case. One night, he tried to sell it at an auction, but no one bid. The room grew colder, and the lights flickered as whispers filled the air. Desperate, the dealer returned to the house and left the doll on the porch, hoping to rid himself of its curse. As he drove away, his rearview mirror revealed a chilling sight. The doll was no longer on the porch but standing in the middle of the road, watching him leave. That was the last time anyone saw the antiques dealer or his car. The doll remains a dark mystery, its origins unknown. Some say it belonged to a grieving mother who cursed it with her sorrow. Others believe it is an ancient relic, housing a restless spirit. But one thing is certain, anyone who encounters it is marked, and the doll is still out there, waiting. Perhaps the next time you see an antique shop, a flea market, or an old forgotten house, you'll think twice before picking up something that calls to you. Because sometimes, objects are more than just things. They're waiting, watching, and hungry for a new home. Beware the doll. Beware what might be waiting for you. The doll still waits, patient and unyielding. Those who have crossed its path are gone, their stories swallowed by whispers in the dark. But the doll remains, its cracked smile a promise, its glassy eyes unblinking, and maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for someone like you. Because cursed things don't just disappear. They find a way back. They always do. You might think the story ends here, that the doll has returned to its prison, its thirst for fear and chaos satisfied. But stories like this don't have endings. They only spread, creeping into new homes, new lives, and maybe yours. You may think the doll is trapped here, left to gather dust and fade away. But cursed objects are never truly forgotten. They wait. They bide their time. Because the moment you think you're safe, the moment you think it's over, that's when they find you. Months passed after the doll returned to the abandoned house. But cursed things have a way of being found. A family, eager to start fresh, bought the old property, drawn to its low price. They had no idea of the terror that lay waiting for them. Their young daughter, Sophie, was the first to notice the doll, hidden in the attic, her tiny hands brushing off decades of dust. At first, Sophie loved the doll. She called it her special friend. She played with it, spoke to it, and even insisted it sit at the dinner table. Her parents thought it was harmless, just a child's imagination. But soon, they began to notice strange things. Sophie talked to the doll even when she was alone. They heard her whispering at night, responding to something they couldn't hear. It wasn't long before the family realized the doll wasn't just a toy. The whispers they thought were Sophie's voice now echoed through the house when she wasn't even in the room. Doors slammed shut on their own, and shadows flickered across the walls, even when no one was near. The mother tried to throw the doll away, but every time, it reappeared, always sitting on Sophie's bed, waiting for her. By the time they realized the danger, it was too late. Sophie began to change. She stopped eating, stopped speaking, and spent all her time in her room with the doll. Her once bright laughter was replaced with blank stares and soft murmurs. The family tried to intervene, but something, or someone, was always watching. One night, the father woke to the sound of laughter echoing through the house. Soft, high-pitched, and chilling. Following the sound, he found Sophie standing in the living room, holding the doll. Her face was expressionless, her eyes empty. When he tried to take the doll from her, she screamed, an unearthly, piercing sound that shook the walls. Lights flickered, and shadows danced violently as the doll's head turned, on its own. They fled the house that night, leaving everything behind, but even now, they say Sophie's laughter can still be heard echoing through the halls. And the doll, well, the doll remains, waiting for the next family to claim it. Months later, the house was sold again, this time to a young woman named Emma, who planned to renovate it. She found the doll sitting in the attic, its lifeless eyes glinting in the dim light. Thinking it was valuable, she brought it downstairs, placing it on the mantelpiece. Emma dismissed the strange noises at first, chalking them up to the creaks of an old house. But the doll's curse was patient. It didn't need to act immediately. It only needed time. The doll's story isn't over. It never is. Some objects carry the weight of evil. An evil that can't be destroyed, only passed on. So the next time you find something old, something forgotten, remember this. Not all treasures are worth keeping, and some should be left alone, forever. Maria's life shattered when her husband, James, died unexpectedly. Consumed by sorrow and seeking solace, she stumbled upon a job posting for a cemetery archivist at Edgewood Cemetery, a sprawling and decrepit graveyard on the outskirts of town. The role required cataloging old, forgotten graves, names long erased by time. Maria found an odd sense of peace in the quiet of the cemetery. She applied immediately, her grief blending into the stillness of the graveyard. Her first few weeks on the job passed without incident. By day, Maria pored over faded records, cross-referencing gravestones and filling in gaps. At dusk, she would venture into the cemetery with her lantern and notebook, jotting notes about unmarked graves. Her employer, a reclusive older man named Mr. Whitlock, seemed content with her progress and rarely checked in. It started subtly, an almost imperceptible scratching noise late at night. At first, Maria dismissed it as rodents burrowing beneath the graves, but the sound was persistent. Each time she cataloged an unmarked grave, the scratching seemed to grow louder. The nights felt heavier, the air thicker. One evening, as she worked, her lantern dimmed unexpectedly. The scratching was clearer than ever. She leaned down, pressing her ear close to the soil. The sound came from directly beneath her feet. Her curiosity became unbearable. She decided to investigate one of the graves that had been particularly noisy. Using a shovel borrowed from the cemetery tool shed, she dug late into the night, her breath visible in the cold air. What she uncovered sent a chill through her. The coffin she unearthed was unlike any she'd ever seen. It was locked from the inside, and the lid bore deep claw marks, scratches that seemed to tell of a desperate attempt to escape. Frightened but intrigued, Maria scoured old records for clues. She uncovered stories of the unmarked dead, individuals buried hastily and unceremoniously during times of plague, famine, or war. Legends whispered that some of these souls were interred prematurely, while others were buried for darker reasons, out of fear of what they might become. Compelled by a force she couldn't understand, Maria returned to the unearthed coffin. With trembling hands, she pried off the rusted padlock and opened the lid. Inside, the coffin was empty, but the claw marks continued along its interior. A faint metallic scent lingered in the air. Carved into the coffin walls were cryptic symbols, unlike anything she'd ever seen. The scratching noise, which had grown deafening as she opened the coffin, abruptly stopped. That night, the cemetery came alive. Graves she had cataloged seemed to hum with energy, their soil shifting as though something below was stirring. Maria fled to her small office, locking the door behind her. The scratching noises began again, this time from every direction. Desperate for answers, Maria confronted Mr. Whitlock. He revealed a horrifying truth. Edgewood Cemetery was a prison for restless souls, many of whom had been buried alive centuries ago. The archivist's role was not merely to catalog the graves, but to maintain the fragile barrier keeping the spirits at bay. By disturbing the coffin, Maria had unknowingly broken the seal. Maria realized what she had to do. Using Whitlock's guidance, she sealed the coffin again, etching the protective symbols back onto its lid. With great effort, she lowered it into a newly dug grave and covered it with soil. The cemetery quieted, the scratching noises fading into the early morning light. Though the cemetery seemed peaceful once more, Maria knew its secrets would linger. She remained as the archivist, her grief intertwined with her duty. In the silence of the graveyard, she found a sense of purpose, an eternal vigil for the restless souls of Edgewood Cemetery. Weeks passed, and life settled into an odd routine for Maria. The scratching noises were gone, replaced by a stillness that felt heavier than before. As she worked, she couldn't shake the sensation of being watched, not by something hostile, but by something aware. Every time she passed the newly sealed grave, the air seemed to grow colder, the surrounding graves quieter, as if the earth itself held its breath. One evening, she noticed a small detail she had missed before. Near the coffin she had reburied was a line of faint footprints, leading toward the grave and then vanishing into the soil. They were too small to be her own and looked impossibly old, as if pressed into the earth centuries ago. The wind carried voices now, soft murmurs, fragments of words she couldn't understand. At first, Maria thought it was her imagination, but as the days wore on, the whispers grew clearer. They seemed to guide her to specific graves she had not yet catalogued. Each grave she marked brought with it a story, tragedies long forgotten, injustices left unresolved. Maria found herself compelled to leave small offerings at these graves, flowers, coins, or even handwritten notes. Each gesture seemed to bring a sense of calm to the whispers, as though she were fulfilling a role long abandoned. In the cemetery's archives, Maria uncovered a journal belonging to a previous archivist. The entries were erratic, written in a frantic scrawl that grew more unhinged over time. The writer spoke of the Warden of Rest, a being tasked with maintaining the balance between the living and the dead. The role, it seemed, was not merely a job, but a lifelong bond with the cemetery. The final entry chilled Maria. The graves whisper to me, their voices growing louder. I fear I am not enough to keep them contained. If you are reading this, the warden's mantle has passed to you. May you fare better than I did. Maria began to dream of the cemetery. In her dreams, she walked paths that didn't exist in waking life, paths that led to places untouched by time. One night, she found herself before a massive iron door deep in the earth, sealed with a key she had never seen before. When she woke, the same key lay on her desk. Taking the key, she ventured into the oldest part of the cemetery, where gravestones were little more than crumbled stones and moss-covered mounds. There she found a hidden mausoleum. The key fit perfectly into its lock. Inside, Maria discovered the source of the cemetery's power. The altar seemed alive, pulsing with a faint, rhythmic glow. Inscribed upon it were the same symbols she had seen in the coffin. A single phrase, carved in elegant script, caught her attention. To disturb the dead is to awaken the past. She realized that the altar served as a tether between the living and the dead. Her role as the archivist, no, the warden, was to ensure that balance remained intact. Maria stood at a crossroads. She could abandon the role, leave the cemetery behind, and try to live a normal life, though she doubted she could escape its pull. Or she could embrace her duty, knowing it would consume her entirely. As dawn broke, Maria returned to the mausoleum. She placed her hand on the altar and whispered, "I accept." The cemetery seemed to sigh in relief. The whispers faded, replaced by a profound silence. For the first time, Maria felt a strange sense of peace. Maria became the warden of rest, the keeper of secrets, the protector of balance. The cemetery thrived under her watch, its stories preserved, its dead at peace. But she knew the balance was fragile, and one day it might demand more than she was willing to give. For now, she remained silent, watchful, eternal.